Ladies and gentlemen, with the release of CC10, we got a new joint operation banner, where the only operators you can get are the one who is featured in the banner. This time featuring Carnelian, Magallan, Bagpipe and Passenger, and some other 5 stars. Compared to previous joint operations, I must say most of the 6 stars here are not a must-have to make clearing stages significantly easier, but can provide some utility that is useful for you. So in this video, I will give a short review of the featured operators, giving you their upside and downside and see if they're really for you. But to not waste your time, I will say it now. Only pull this banner if you at least don't have 3 of the featured operators. Not having 2 or even 1, it's going to be a hell of a gamble. And if you are still uncertain, might as well skip this one. As I said, compared to previous joint operations, not all of the 6 stars featured here are very awesome. And upcoming banners are without a doubt will give us some more interesting operators. Or maybe the current standard banner suits your taste. So with that said, let's see each of the operators in this banner. First, let's see Carnelian. Carnelian is a 6-star phalanx caster that has her summer skin getting delayed and I'm kinda sad. Anyway, she is a caster that only attacks when her skill is active. But her attack is AoE attack that can hit all enemies in range. And thanks to phalanx caster trait that gives extra defense and resistance shield. When her skill is not active, she is quite tough against the enemy's attack. And so is a perfect ranged unit to use as bait. Though if possible get some ground unit to tank instead. Because when her skill is active she is vulnerable like most ranged unit. Although she has a talent that can recover her HP when her skill is active. But it doesn't really make her self-sustain, so better prepare a healer. Carnelian is mostly used for 2 things. One is for crowd control with her skill 2. And dealing massive damage with her skill 3. All of her skills have a low SP cost. But it's important to note that all of her skills can be charged. And to make the most out of her you need to charge her skills. Luckily with her second talent SP recovery boost, waiting for the second charge of her skills isn't too painful. Especially since the effect can be stacked. Most of Carnelian's drawback came from her usual archetype drawback. That is she can't hit enemies when her skill is not active. And she needs her skills to be charged to make the most out of her. And there's also some issues with her skill 3. S3 damage ramps up over time. So she won't unleash her biggest damage immediately. And the charged effect damage increase requires multiple hits to stack. Making it take quite a long time to reach its peak damage. So that's some of her problems. But if you can manage that, her crowd control and AoE damage can be a valuable asset to your team. Next up, we have Magallan. Magallan is our first 6-star summoner. Having a wide variety of drones for different purposes. Like her skill 1 will make her and her drones inflict slow in their range. And inflict bind instead when her skill is active. As for skill 2, her drones can be deployed on melee tiles. And acting as some kind of mine that will deal arts damage to the enemy beneath. And when the skill is active it will give an attack speed bonus to Magallan and the drones. And the drones attack will turn into AoE damage. For skill 3, her drones can deal AoE physical damage. When the skill is active, Maggie and her drones will gain an attack boost. And the AoE range of the drones will be increased. It's also important to note that her drones are quite weak. And will be targeted by the enemy as soon as they are deployed. Luckily with Maggie's talent 2, they will gain a camouflage effect for some time. Magallan can support your team with a variety of skills. And summoners are typically useful in a stage where the number of operators you can bring is being restricted. Or early floor of IS mode. As for her drawback, like all summoners, her drones also take deployment slot. So there's more management needed when you use her. And summoner isn't really an easy unit to use for newcomer, especially Magallan. Nevertheless, if you think she can help you in your stage run, she might be a great unit for you, especially her S1 is somewhat irreplaceable. Alright, moving on to Miss Fiona Young, the one and only Bagpipe. Arguably the best 6-star vanguard in the game. with her talents and skills. She is a vanguard that can inflict big damage and hit multiple enemies. So while her being a charger vanguard makes her not a good vanguard to gain DP. But you might find her oftenly kills an enemy and then gain DP. But her main usefulness is from her ability to support the team in the stage early phase. And that is her second talent. That allow her to add extra initial SP to all vanguards. Typically useful for the DP printer trio. Or the fast redeploy vanguard, the agent. The difference between having her start your stage is like heaven and earth. Especially in some tight timing stages. And for facing the enemy head on, she's also a great unit to do that. So without a doubt she is an irreplaceable asset to your team. Lastly, for the 6th star, we have Passenger. Passenger is a chain caster that can hit multiple enemies and inflict a brief slow on them. His skill 2 can expand his range and reduce his attack interval. Mainly used to deal damage consistently and make the most out of his slow. Skill 3 is his mainly used burst damage skill. That can hit the enemy pretty hard and can cover a wider range. But this skill got some uptime issues and targeting priority. Though it's pretty manageable. Passenger can be a reliable multiple enemies handler. But because of this archetype drawback that reduces their damage on each attack jump, he might need more investment to deal more damage. Particularly he will need his E2 promotion and a module. Anyway, those who are looking for someone to handle waves of enemies, he is a good option. Okay, for the 5 stars. Some are great, some are replaceable. First, let's take a look at Skyfire. Miss Magallan is a splash caster that can increase the art's damage taken by all blocked enemies. Her most used skill is her skill 2. That will make her summon a meteorite that deals critical damage and can stun enemies briefly. The skill has a long duration, but given how slow she attacks, plus this skill increased attack interval, she might deal fewer hits than what you expect. But luckily the SP cost of this skill is quite low. Overall she's a good 5-star unit. Then we have Shammer, a Hexa supporter. Like Pramonix, she can apply a fragile effect to enemies with less than 40% HP when the enemies are in her range. Her skill 1 can amplify this effect. But most people will use Shammer with her skill 2. That will allow her to deploy more anywhere on the map. And will reduce the enemy's attack and defense. Overall a great versatile debuffer. Next up, Mr. Nothing. Mr. Nothing is a merchant specialist that has the talent to deal critical damage after he's not attacking for some time. And got a useful skill 2 for heli drop usage, or straight up holding a lane. If you can endure the gacha, as the effect is randomly active. He's probably the least effective merchant to use, given how unpredictable his skill 2 is, and skill 1 is even not more practical. Not someone I will recommend to get or build immediately, but you might find him useful. And then we have Toddifans. Her talent, with the power of racism, she will deal critical damage when hitting a sarcasm. Toddifans also have a unique skill 1 that will mark the enemy, and make them a primary target for others. Also reducing their defense, and each attack will deal critical damage. It's a decent damage and unique skill. But keep in mind she will prioritize heavier target and a sarcasm. And someone with targeting priority like Deadeye Sniper will ignore her mark. Skill 2 is slightly less interesting, but it deals a pretty high damage. And additional AoE damage to surrounding enemies. Sounds good, but the downside is that this skill has a pretty high SP cost. And the ammo she gets is quite low. Toddifans is a decent sniper with a unique ability to put aggro on a specific enemy. But when compared to other 5-star besieger like Erito, I prefer her for the constant DPS. Next up on the list is La Pluma. Not only La Pluma is the best Reaper guard in the game, but also currently the only one. She can hit all enemies in her range, and her range can give an advantage in some stages. She's a great landholder, especially when facing multiple enemies. And thanks to her talent, her attack speed is also quick. Her main problem mostly came from the fact that she can only be healed by using regeneration healing, or when attacking enemies. So in a situation during wave downtime with her being targeted from afar, without an enemy to lifesteal and someone to give HP regeneration, or when facing a tougher foe that can outdamage her healing, she can get in trouble. But all in all, she is a great ground unit to have to handle multiple enemies. Last but not least, we have Mulberry. Mulberry is a wandering medic that specializes in countering elemental damage. Her skill 1 gave her the ability to constantly counter elemental damage and increase her healing effectiveness, while skill 2 focuses on reducing the elemental damage taken to lies in her range and giving a burst of healing with her reduced attack interval. Mulberry is an awesome wandering medic. Though if you have already built Honeyberry you probably don't really need her. I can say both are equally good, but personally I like Mulberry more for her skill 2, and her talent benefits more for a medic. Okay, that should cover all of the featured operators. As I said earlier, I only recommend you to pull this if you at least don't have 3 of the featured 6 stars. Unless you're also looking for the operator's potential. But the only primary target for a potential upgrade here is Bagpipe, and getting a specific operator in this banner is difficult. So better to upgrade the operator's potential through different means. And if you don't have confidence in your luck with this banner, might as well save for the upcoming banner. We got lots of interesting and strong operators in the future. That should be all. Adios.